Good morning, everyone. Today, the first Sunday of the month, we go back to the book Action and Reaction. As usual, I'm going to talk about what we discussed last month. The study last month was a very deep one, heavy one, but it's worth, for those that missed, it's worth watching. We discussed, it's called Opportune Remarks. And first, examining through the example of Marcela and her son Roberto from chapter 14, we study Freudian theories of the Oedipus complex and children's forgetfulness of the past. Then evaluation, we saw the evaluation by assistant Silas of Freud's theory of libido, studying sexuality, sex and responsibility in unfulfilled sexual or marital commitments. Also, we cover atonements resulting from degraded sexuality, the issue of sexual inversion, addressing the problem of systematic infertility brought about by worthy and respectable couples through the use of contraceptives. And finally, we talked about abortion, the difficult rehabilitation for faults of this nature. So today we are on chapter 16 called Mitigated Debt. Again, remember this book, Action and Reaction. What we are studying is several separate cases. We had the main story covering that we discussed previously, but now we are seeing in each chapter different cases of action and reaction. So what we're going to study today in this chapter called Mitigated Debt is a case of one individual and his present work and what happened to him that made him face the challenges that he's facing in his present incarnation, and what he's doing to recover from his past mistakes. We are going to go over the whole events again. When we read about his story, it's like we saw previously in this book. It's a very lively description of his previous incarnation, a lot of interesting passages that are that we may that may remind ourselves of a soap opera, but these in reality are true cases of action and reaction. So let's focus on cause and consequence, action and reaction when we are reading the story. Okay, Zoraida, can you read for us?
Yes, of course. Could you enlarge the letters a little bit?
Okay.
Please.
Like this, good or more?
A little more, a little more.
Like this?
Okay, it's okay. Okay, chapter 16, Mitigated Debt. In our studies of the law of cause and effect, we cannot leave out Adelino Corriera, a brother of pure fraternity. On the eve of a beautiful event that we would like to describe, we visited him with Silas, who introduced him to us at the activities of a Christian Spiritist center. We listened to this brother's invaluable comments on the gospel under the influence of illuminated instructors, whose mental currents he assimilated with the trusting pleurisy of a man profoundly accustomed to praying. He was a wonderful speaker and caused the tears to flow as he touched the innermost fibers of our sentiments. Simply dressed, he showed that he was a worker undergoing difficult circumstances. His trials, however, apparently loomed even larger. A large part of his exposed skin was covered with eczema. Part of his head, his ears, and many parts of his face were covered with red blotches composed of tiny blood vessels, while the rest of his skin appeared cracked indicating a deeply set chronic skin disease. Moreover, shy and sad, he seemed to harbor acute hidden torments. His admirable lucid eyes, however, bore the mark of humility. Several spirit friends were attentively assisting him. A sweet, discarnate old lady approached us, and because she knew Silas personally, she addressed him affectionately. My dearest assistant, I would like to ask for your assistance on behalf of our Adelino's health. I've noticed that he has become more uncomfortable lately due to his open sores. Yes, yes, answered Silas cordially. His case deserves our special attention. Because he thinks about others' needs instead of his own, added the woman, very touched. Two of our doctors have been taking care of him when he leaves his body during sleep, replied Druso's assistant. And caressing her gray hair, he added, Don't worry, Adelino will soon be completely healed. The multitude tasks at the center were moving right along, and in the midst of them, Adelino attracted our attention due to his spiritual confidence. Surrounded by the radiant vibrations arising from his thoughts because he focused on the sacred purpose of the good, he seemed like a worker dressed in light. A few moments later, after the elderly woman, we were approached by a friendly young discarnate man. After greeting us, he asked the assistants respectfully, I would like to ask you a favor. Please do, the young man explained with tearful eyes. My son, my dear assistant, our Delino is having financial problems because he helps others so much. He has been neglecting his own needs. He is always helping my poor incarnate mother, so I would ask for your help on his behalf. Just last week, my widowed mother didn't have the means to get medical treatment for my two sick brothers, so I went to him in tears and mentally begged him to help us out. He didn't hesitate for a second, believing he was obeying his own impulses. He visited our house and gave my poor mother the money she needed. Dear assistant, for the love of Jesus, I beg you, don't forsake someone who has helped us out so much. Silas answered the request with a smile of benevolence. Don't worry, Adelino is in a web of fraternal affinity that he has woven for himself. A lot of friends are supplying him with the resources he needs to faithfully carry out his caring task. Circumstances of a material nature will come together in his favor as a consequence of his acquired merit. The spontaneous and caring requests on behalf of trusting and helpful Adelino was certainly an example of friendship and gratitude worth studying. It seems, Hilario remarked, a bit intrigued, that all the workers who come through this place are debtors to our brothers Adelino. Yes, confirmed Silas patiently. Adelino's credits are truly enormous, despite a few remarking debts. However, he cultivates the joy of a solid faith and the superior knowledge given by Jesus' messengers, who have entrusted him with tasks of genuine fraternal love that have brought him a large recognition by others. Our mentor suggested that we spend a little time offering fraternal assistance at the Evangelical Center until we could come into close contact with Adelino, whose current reincarnation was being closely monitored by Mancial. In light of the sympathy that Adelino inspired in us, we approached him in order to somehow offer a little help with the magnetic passes he was now applying to some alien attendees. It was interesting to note that during our first casual meeting, we felt ready and willing to take part in his work simply because we were attracted by his radiant goodness. Selfishness, wherever found, is always a sublime radiant star. All it has to do is show itself, and everyone gravitates around its light. Once the evening's work had ended, Silas, Hilario, and I followed Adelino home. His mother looked to be over 60 and was waiting for him at the door. Silas promptly introduced her. This is our sister Leontina, the loving mother and friend watching over Adelino during this lifetime. Noticing his mature age, my colleague asked, Isn't Adelino married? Yes, our brother is married, but his wife isn't here. This answer suggested that our friend was going through a trial that demanded our respectful discretion. As mother and son conversed affectionately, Sila led us into an adjacent room. By the door, there were 3 beds in a row, occupied by small children. A blonde girl of about 9 or 10 years old was flanked by 2 little dark-skinned boys, bringing to mind Snow White and the little dwarfs. All 3 were peacefully asleep. Nodding toward the girl, the assistant informed us that is Maritza, Adelino's daughter. Her mother ran out on her 6 years ago. Then indicating the little boys, he added, and these little ones are Mario and Raul, 2 warts that Adelino adopted as sons of his heart, guessing the hidden afflictions that were obviously swarming around Adelino's life. Hilario and I kept still in reverent expectation.
Okay, thanks, Soraya. So we're talking here, again, studying the law of cause and effect, of action and reaction. Andre Luiz and Hilario go with Silas. If you remember, Silas is an assistant in the mansão that they are visiting, Andre Luiz and Hilario, since the beginning of the book. The house of assistance, a spiritual house of assistance that is located in the lower zones that we saw in the description in the beginning of the book, is run by Druso, who we are going to see later in this chapter. Silas is an assistant to Druso that works in the colony, and is helping Andre Luiz and Hilario visiting separate cases, different cases. So they go to a spiritist center and to visit Adelino Correa, as they describe here, who they describe here as a brother of pure fraternity, which means a spirit that is incarnated spirit that is working tirelessly on his own moral and intellectual progress by means of helping and assisting others at all times, incessantly, as we are seeing in the description. So they listen to him talk, and while he's talking, he's directly connected and influenced by illuminated instructors, meaning his vibrations are at a high level, and when he is talking and vibrating at this high level, of course, he's open to receive the assistance of the spiritual benefactors. I think it's important here to remind ourselves that when we vibrate at a higher level, when we try to keep our thoughts elevated, and that's what we always say in the beginning in our prayers, we associate ourselves with high order spirits, with our familiar ones, with our guardian angels, and we avoid connections with less evolved spirits that are trying to cause us harm or influence us in any negative way. So because of the work that he does in his life every day, he's surrounded by illuminated instructors that are helping him in all different aspects of his work. So he was a wonderful speaker, and everyone got emotion when he talked. And but as we can see by the description, he has some physical illnesses, exposed skin with eczema and red blotches, so a lot of chronic skin disease, and he seemed to harbor hidden torments, but he looked very humble, and there were several spirit friends helping him. An old lady asked for help in terms of his health because he's struggling, and Silas said that he's going to be assisted, and say that 2 of the doctors spiritual doctors have been taking care of him when he go to sleep. And then he says that he'll be healed. And Andre Luiz describes that Adelino attracted their attention due to his spiritual confidence. So you see that despite all his physical struggles and even his mental torments, his spiritual confidence radiates. So he's surrounded by radiant vibrations arising from his thought because he focused on the sacred purpose of the good. He seemed like a worker dressed in light. The description that Andre Luiz makes of him, an incarnate being vibrating at these high levels, is surrounded by light. And then we see another case of his work as a young man approaches Silas and asks a favor to help him on his financial aspects. It's interesting here, right? Because we talk a lot of a spiritual assistance, of the need to maintain our thoughts elevated, but this young man is asking him to receive financial assistance. How can the spirits provide financial assistance for someone in need? Well, the spirits can influence through mental connections to those that can be of help. You see here in the example, he gives the example, right? Because this young man, widowed mother, didn't have the means to get medical treatment, so he connected mentally. Again, he's a discarnate spirit. He connected mentally to Adelino and begged him to help. And Adelino, believing he was listening to his own impulses, went visit the house and gave the poor mother the money she needed. So he's asking for him to be helped to have the means to be able to continue his work, right? And Silas answers that Adelino is in a web of fraternal affinity that he has woven for himself, that he attracted for himself. So a lot of friends are supplying him with the resources he needs to faithfully carry out his caring tasks. Circumstances of material nature will come together in his favor as a consequence of his acquired merit. It's not that he's going to win the lottery or anything like that. It's just that the needed resources will come to him in his time of needs. Of course, because he thinks of others all the time without thinking much about himself, he is putting in practice what Kardec teaches us, right? Without charity, there is no salvation. Because he's practicing charity at all times, he will receive the assistance he needs, physical, spiritual, and material, according to the possibilities and according, of course, to the free will. So the spirits can inspire those that can help him to go there and help and assist him. So Elario says that all the workers here to come to this place are debtors to Adelino, and Silas said that yes, his credits are enormous, but he still has some remaining debts. He is working to help all those that surround him. And Andre Luiz describes how naturally they are attracted to him. We felt ready and willing to take part in his work simply because we were attracted by his radiant goodness. So even if they didn't know the story, just the vibrations he emit attracts spirits that want to help, want to connect. So Andre Luiz and Hilario are help immediately attracted to help and assist him during his work. He's giving some passes there. So without any selfish, is always a sublime, radiant star that shines, right? All it has to do is show itself, and everyone gravitates around its light. And then they go and follow Adelino's home. They describe his family, the mother that looked over 60, and Silas say that Adelino is married, but the wife is not there, no reason given. And in the adjacent room, they see three beds, a blonde girl of about 9 or 10 years old, and two little dark-skinned boys. And Adelino says that that's Marisa, Adelino's daughter, and the little boys are Mario and Raul, two young children that Adelino adopted as sons of his heart. So that's the description of the case of Adelino. Okay? Any questions or comments here? Okay, let's continue, Soraya.
Okay. Silas grasped our attitude and began a more in-depth explanation in order to praise the sacred effort of a friend and also to give us an opportunity to study a case of mitigated depth. I will give you some details of Adelino's last incarnation, which he is now working to redeem. Silas was silent for a moment in order to focus on the resources of his memory and finally continued. In the middle of the last century, Adelino was the legitimate son of a very wealthy young man who received him from his slave mother's arms just before she died in childbirth. Martin Gasper, the young landowner and single father, was a hard-hearted man. Very early in life, he became filled with tyrannical pride due to his family's carelessness. He sexually molested the slave girls as he pleased, and on several occasions he sold them and their bastard newborns so that he wouldn't have to listen to their weeping and appeals. Feared around the manor, he ruled like a tyrant after the death of his old father, who had tried too late and to no avail to control his son's instincts. He made use of the whipping post without mercy. He was hated by the majority of slaves, but was fawned over by those who obtained his favor in exchange for civil flattery. However, toward his son, Martin Jr., the current Adelino, his tenderness and devotion were boundless. Much of his own surprise, he loved the boy with concealed love to the point of giving him the best education possible right there on the plantation. Consequently, the more sacred bonds of love were established between father and son. They were inseparable companions at play and study, at work and on the hunt. Notwithstanding his cruelty toward his other children in the miserable slaves' quarters, Martin Sr. didn't hesitate to legitimize Martin Jr. as his son before the authorities of the time, bestowing on him both his name and his inheritance. Father and son were 43 and 21 years old, respectively, when the father, although a middle-aged bachelor, decided to go to the big city and marry Maria Emilia, an irresponsible 20-year-old. When she arrived at the plantation, her stepson developed a strange fascination for her. Young Martin may have been dearly loved by his father, but he was now attracted to his stepmother's feminine charms and started to experience tormenting emotional conflicts. He used to consider himself his father's best friend, but he began to detest him. He couldn't stand his father possessing the woman he desired, especially because he knew that Maria Emilia ardently returned his feelings. She used any pretext she could to find a way to be alone with him on the family's many trips. thereby stroking his youthful passion. They were able to avoid raising any suspicions, and totally entranced by the passion that consumed him, young Martin plotted the horrible crime of murdering his father. When the father became bedridden due to a liver ailment, the son got the help of two entirely trustworthy farmhands, Antonio and Lucidio, also abusers of slave girls. And one night, with Maria Emilia's approval, he gave Gaspar a strong sedative. As soon as he was asleep, and with the help of two accomplices who hated their boss, young Martin soaked his father's bed with an inflammable substance and set him on fire. Poor Martin Sr., discarnated in horrible agony, after buying his father and taking possession of all his assets, he tried to be happy with Maria Emilia. However, his discarnate father was aflame with rage and enveloped Martin in clouds of inflamed energies, against which the wretch had no defense. Leaning on his companion's love, Martin Jr. tried to anesthetize his conscience and forget. He entrusted the plantation to his two accomplices and sailed with Maria Emilia to Europe in search of rest and leisure, all to no avail. After resisting for 5 years, he fell completely under the yoke of his father's spirit, who was constantly by his side, albeit invisible. His skin opened in sores as if burned by hidden flames. Beridden with pain and constantly given to remorse, Martin Jr. mentally recapitulated his father's death in appalling cries of excruciating suffering. He could do nothing but weep and randomly scream out his repentance. He was considered to be mad even by Maria Emilia, who was quick to acknowledge his mental alienation so as to appear innocent to friends and servants. Bound to such torture, Martin Jr. ended up despised and abandoned by his own family circle and discarnated in dreadful suffering. The murdered Martin Gaspar Sr. was waiting for him at the grave and dragged him down into the infernal darkness, where he began to wreak his terrifying revenge. Incarcerated in darkness, the wretched son suffered horrific humiliation and indescribable torment for 11 years, until one day, supported by Jesus' messengers, he was brought to our institute in deplorable state. From what I was told, he had gotten in tune with his revenge-thirsty father through the mental waves of belated remorse and repentance, and had been hypnotized by evil spirits who made him feel like he was immersed in torturous flames. With his imagination set on such a picture of anguish, young Martin's own thoughts of guilt nourished the flames that tortured him without destroying him, until he was given some relief by our instructors through magnetic procedures that healed his dolorous imbalance. Once improved, he dedicated himself to the hardest work in our organization, winning over time noteworthy accolades that enabled him to return to the human spheres with the right to begin paying off the enormous debt he had recklessly taken on. Cultivating prayer with the renewal of his inner self, he was reborn with an inclination toward active and ardent religious faith, and influenced by discarnate friends. He found in Jesus-centered Spiritism an invaluable arena for moral strengthening and worthwhile work. Making the most of his time, he has expanded his field of action between uplifting study and pure charity, hereby attracting great sympathy from incarnate and discarnate brothers and sisters who owed him generosity and love. He grew up amid immense material difficulties and without a father because he had not valued his father's tenderness in his former life. He struggled constantly against extreme poverty and chronic bad health. However, watched over by benefactors from Marsal, he was led to a spiritist center where he was still very young. There he began treatment for his skin condition and was introduced to our renewing doctrine. The reading of spiritist principles in the sunlight of the Lord's gospel was the natural memory of the teachings assimilated at Mansal before his reincarnation. From that moment on, he willingly accepted the responsibility of living and sought, above all, to apply to himself the regenerative principles of the faith he had embraced. He disciplined himself. He sincerely honored his his commitments, and despite his physical handicaps, from a young age, he has dedicated himself to various enterprises by which he earns and blesses resources he shares with a great number of needy people, keeping for himself only what is absolutely essential. He is not a rich man in the world's eyes, but a fraternal worker who works hard to give his own heart in everything he gives to others, walking the pathway of simplicity and edifying selflessness. He has changed the opinions of many of his former fellow companions, who in the lower layers of darkness had been his persecutors and enemies. As they observed his new behavior, these obsessors felt morally disarmed for the animosity they had intended to maintain. Thus, he is paying for his wrongs by feeling their torment within himself. However, due to the merit he has accumulated by devoting himself to the good of others, he is redeeming his past with as much relief as possible, gaining time and acquiring new blessings. By helping others, he is decreasing his mountain of debt by the day. But the Heavenly Father allows our creditors to mitigate the harshness of exaction whenever they see us offering our needy neighbor something of what we owe them.
Thanks, Zoraida. That was a long one, right? That's the whole story here. Again, we need to understand how someone so good and that so selfless, that dedicates his life to help others incessantly, came to be such a struggling, to have such a struggling life, right? With physical ailments, with financial difficulties, with the wife leaving him behind. So the story of Adelino we see here in the middle of the last century, meaning this book was written in the 20th century, so the 19th century. Adelino was the son of a slave and the landowner's son, right? And there was this attraction between the father and the son. The son, Martin Gaspar, was a very hard-hearted man, mistreated the slaves, had abused the slaves, sold the slaves, and all the rule like a tyrant. But he had a strange love for his young son that he had, Martin Jr., that the current Adelino, that he had with one of the slaves that died on childbirth. So they describe how their lives. He and his son had a very loving relationship, but when he was 43 and Adelino / Martin Jr. was 21, the father married with a young girl, 20-year-old girl, irresponsible. And of course, what happened is the 21-year-old and the 20-year-old became attracted to each other. And because they had no moral compass, the young Martin allowed his love for her to overcome his relationship with the father. He ends up killing the father by setting him on fire. Again, setting him on fire. What happens when someone dies by fire? The skin gets destroyed. So we can see that the consequences of Adelino's in this present incarnation, the reaction is because of the fire that he caused his father to perish from, Martin Sr., right? So his discarnate father, when he goes back to the spiritual world, what happens? His life continues. All he can feel is the rage towards the son that killed him. So he surrounds the son with all these inferior, inflamed energies, and the son has no defense, of course, because he's vibrating at a very low level, very inferior vibrations, and he connects to all those that persecute him. Of course, after the excitement of the act, life goes back to normal, and what happens? Guilt comes to him, right? And after struggling for 5 years, then he completely fell under his father's influence, constantly by his side, and he starts paying the consequences. He starts having skin diseases, and he stays bedridden after trying to escape to Europe, because we think that we can escape our problems by running away from where we are, but our conscience goes with us wherever we go. So our guilt also goes with us. So he went to Europe, but he continues to carry the obsessors, the guilty conscience, and he continues recapitulating his father's death everywhere he went, of course, because of his own guilt and because of his father's influence. And eventually he went back to the spiritual world. He discarnated in pain, and his father was there waiting for him at the grave and dragged him down to the lower zones, to the infernal darkness, and where the son was suffering the revenge. He stayed there for 11 years. I marked here 11 years, right? Because I think it's important for us to understand the length of his torment. But what happened here? How he was one day supported by Jesus' messengers, who was brought to our institute, meaning the mansion. Because after a certain point, he opened himself to receive the help and assistance of the spiritual benefactors. How he did that, we don't know. It's not described here, but of course, we are only helped and assisted when we open ourselves to receive the help. So he was somehow taken to the place, to Mansão, where he receives the help and assistance. He was given some relief through magnetic procedures, and eventually was able to get a little bit of healing. And once he improved, he started dedicating himself to the hardest work. So he recognized his responsibility and start working incessantly to renew himself. So eventually, by the hardest work, he enabled him. They don't say how many years, but we can deduct that is many, many years. He was able to return to the human sphere. He was reincarnated to begin paying his enormous debt that he recklessly taken on. Again, his own responsibility. But he came to a new reincarnation, cultivating prayer with an inclination towards an active and ardent religious faith. And he found in Spiritism an invaluable arena for moral strengthening and worthwhile work. But of course, facing the consequences of his past actions, he grew up amid immense material difficulties without a father, consequence of him having killed his own father. He has not valued the father. Remember, the father loved him, and he killed his father. He struggled with bad health, extreme poverty, but he was always watched by the benefactors from Mansão, and he was led to a spiritist center. And it's interesting. The reading of Spiritist principle in the sunlight of the Lord's Gospel was the natural memory of the teachings assimilated at Mansão before his reincarnation. So again, we bring with us everything that we acquire on the spiritual world, and everything that he had learned and studied in Mansão for many years, for sure many years, it was imprinted in his conscious. And when he starts studying Spiritism, when we start reading Spiritist works, it all came back naturally to him. So all these things that are imprinted in his subconscious from his learning in the spiritual world are brought back to him because he needs this to help deal with his difficulties. So from that moment on, he applied himself to the regenerative principles of faith he had embraced. Start working there. He dedicated himself, and despite his physical handicaps, he took care of several enterprises, and he earns blessed resources that he shared with a great number of needy people. So it's not a rich world in the world, a rich man in the world's eyes, but a fraternal worker who knows how to give. And very interesting. So by doing the work that he's doing, he changed the opinions of many of his former fellow companions who were his persecutors and enemies. As they observed his new behavior, these obsessors felt morally disarmed for the animosity they had intended to maintain. One thing that we always mention, you lead by example, by the example that he showed of his renewal. He made his persecutors and enemies understand what he was going through, the work that he was doing, and eventually changed them. So he's paying for his wrongs by feeling their torment within himself, but no longer through the persecution of others. By helping others, he's decreasing his mountain of debt day by day, because the divine law allows our creditors to mitigate the harshness of exaction whenever they see us offering our needy neighbors something of what we owe them. So every time we think of ourselves before others, that we dedicate ourselves to helping others, we are mitigating our debts. Love covers a multitude of sins, as we are going to see shortly. Okay? Any comments here, questions? Okay, let's move on now.
Silas took a short pause, but Hilario was as fascinated as I was by his clear and sensible explanation, and eager to learn more. He pleaded, "Please continue, assistant. This living lesson illuminates us with hope. How can Adelino be gaining time?" Our friend smiled and replied, "He did not deserve the blessing of a peaceful home after having ruined his father's. He did get married, but was deserted by his wife, who was incapable of understanding his heart." Approaching Marcella's bed, he stated, because of his useful life and his constant charity, he attracted as his daughter the former stepmother he had lured away from his father. She has reincarnated in order to re-educate herself in the warmth of his noble example, while suffering the pain of being the daughter of a woman who deserted the conjugal bed, just as she had done in her last lifetime. But that isn't Adelino's only advantage. Silas touched the sleeping boys' heads lightly and continued, "Dedicated in body and soul to his renewal in Christ, our friend has received as his adopted sons the two accomplices in his father's murder, the farmhands Antonio and Lucidio, because of their past, when they abused humble slave girls whose children they either sold or killed. The two were reborn in brothels and came into the loving circle of their former companion with the African blood they had offended so much, in order to receive from him the moral support for their regeneration. While we pondered this invaluable teaching, Silas remarked, "As you can plainly see, through rightly felt and lived Christian spirit is responsibility. Our, our brother has earned the joy of finding the bonds of his criminal past for the necessity readjustment. If he had deserted the struggle because of his wife's lack of care, or if he had closed the door of his heart to these two unfortunate boys, he would have postponed for many centuries the beautiful work he is doing now." We were ready to ask more questions, but Adelino had bid his mother good night and had come to occupy a modest bed not far from the children. Displaying praiseworthy habits, he sat down and prayed. Silas asked us to join him. Then he approached Adelino and applied a few magnetic passes, telling us afterwards, "Because he spends his days so useful, Adelino has merited the migration of his congenital disease after suffering for so long the perispiritual trauma of remorse for having set his father's body on fire. He forced it within himself strange mental flames which, as I have already said, punished him intensely beyond the grave. That is why he reincarnated with skin tormented by burning vibrations, expressed early on his new physical form by extreme type of eczema. Due to his extensive depth, the disease should have covered his entire body for many painful decades to come. But through the merit he is acquiring, it hasn't taken on proportions that would keep him from working and learning, because he has won the joy of continuing to serve through his willing efforts in the constant sowing of the good." At this point, perhaps because Adelino was ready to go to sleep, the assistant said we should go. Back at Mansao, our kindly mentor was weaving brilliant comments on the apostles' teaching. Love covers a multitude of sins. When Hilario, seconding my curiosity, asked unexpectedly, "Assistant, after such a clear explanation, it would seem fitting to get a few more details. Can you tell us about the status of Martin Gaspar, the father who suffered the torment of being burned alive?" Silas didn't say anything, so my colleague continued. "Does he know about Adelino's efforts at renewal? Does he still despise and hate him?" Tireless as he was in his violence, the assistant finally answered. Martin Gaspar was also touched by our friend's conduct. When he saw his transformation, he abandoned his undesirable companions a few years ago and asked for asylum at our institution, where he accepted a very strict regimen. "And where is he now?" asked Hilario eagerly. Would it be possible to see him and observe his change? But at that instant he entered the sanctuary of our obligations, and with no more time to spare, Silas patted Hilario's shoulder and said, "Relax, Hilario. Maybe we can come back to the subject later." We said goodbye, keeping our notes of the interrupted observations, waiting for their continuation.
Okay, thanks. So what we are seeing here are the consequences and of all the damage that he's caused, but also how he's being able to make reparations very actively and very strongly in one incarnation. We are seeing it is possible. So Hilario asks, how is Adelino gaining this time? And Silas explains he did not deserve a peaceful home, having ruined his father's. But he got married, but was deserted by his wife. Of course, consequence of what he did to his father's marriage. But because of his useful life and his constant charity, he's being able to help his companions in crime. So Marisa, the daughter, is the former stepmother that he took from his father, and she reincarnated as a daughter of a woman who deserted the conjugal bed, as she has done in her last lifetime. The boys are that Adelino adopted are the two accomplices in his father's murder, Antonio and Lucidio, the farmhands. And because of their past, when they abused humble slave girls, whose children they either sold or killed, of course, they were reborn into the African blood and in brothels because of the consequence of what they did. But they are adopted by Adelino to help them also repair their wrongs. So we're seeing here that Adelino is redeeming everything at once. So it is rare, and that's why we're reading the story, because if it was a common reparation that would take lives and lives, which would normally be the case, then we wouldn't have the story. We are seeing when reading the story because it's an exceptional case of someone that makes such a big change that he is being able to make a lot of reparations in one incarnation. So Silas says, if he had closed the door of his heart to these boys, he would have postponed for many centuries the beautiful work he's doing now. And then Adelino prepares to go to sleep, goes to pray, and then Silas describes how he is merited the mitigation on his congenital diseases. Due to his extensive death, the disease should have covered his entire body for many painful decades. But because of the work that he's doing, it hasn't taken on the proportions that would keep him from working and learning. The spiritual benefactors help him and assist him because of the work that he's doing, allowing him to continue the work. Because if the disease takes the proportion that prevents him from working, not only him, but all the others that he helps and assists would not continue receiving his benefits. So the spiritual assistance that comes to him allows him to continue work. So he has won the joy of continuing to serve through his willing efforts in the constant sowing of the good. Again, it's examples of how we can acquire the merits and acquire the assistance of the spiritual benefactors for the good work that we are doing. As Silas explains, love covers a multitude of sins. That comes from Peter. You find the gospel in Simon Peter's words, meaning that we can repair our mistakes and our errors of the past through love or through pain. Unfortunately, we don't know how to pay back through love, and we end up paying with accumulated pain in our existences. But then Hilario asks, what's going on with the father, Martin Gaspar, the father that was an obsessor? Does he still hate the son? And Silas explains that the father was also touched by the son's conduct. Again, remember that he profoundly loved his son. And from this profound love, it becomes a profound hate. But hatred and love are two extremes that touch each other. So for him to erase the hatred that he was able to do by seeing his former son's actions in this present life, what happens? Love comes back. So the love that he had for his son, that he continues having, but he was overshadowed by hatred. The hatred disappears, the love come back. And then Hilario wants to see him, but they are back at Mansão. Silas says to Hilario, relax, maybe we can come back to the subject later. And that's, we are going to see in the last part of this chapter, what happens to the father now. Okay? Any comments, questions here? Okay, Zoraida, last part.
Okay. However, a nice surprise greeted us the very next day. When the clock chimed late at night in the extensive planetary region where we lived, the assistant came looking for us. We would be heading back to the physical realm, but this time with Druso, the institution's director. We were elated, albeit curious. It was the first time we would be traveling with the great mentor who won our deepest respect. And if it is true that we were happy with this privilege, at the same time we wondered why he was leaving the institution that required his ongoing presence. However, there was no time for long digressions. In the company of Druso, who was followed by Silas and two highly experienced sisters from Mansão, and then Hilario and me, we utilized the fastest means for the trip, whose objective was unknown to us, because the highest ranking authority in the institution's daily endeavors would obviously not have time for a trip that was not as quick as possible. I had a burning desire to ask the assistant about subject matter, the subject addressed the night before. However, Druso's presence kept us from discussing any matter that he himself had not broached. But because his dignity kept us from freely expressing ourselves, but because he inspired enormous respect. Thus, during our brief journey, we listened to his wise and opportune thoughts regarding several issues related to justice and work, giving us even more reasons to admire his learning and benevolence. I was astonished when our team stopped at the door of Adelino's house, which we had visited the night before. Two familiar helpers were waiting for us on the doorstep. After mutual greetings, one of them approached Druso and said respectfully, "Director, the little one will be here in a half an hour." The great mentor thanked him and invited us to follow him inside. The clock on the wall indicated 2:20 a.m. Expectantly, we followed the supervisor into the room where Adelino, as far as we could tell, had just fallen asleep. Druso stroked his brow for a few seconds, and then we saw Adelino rise from his physical body, as if he had been drawn out by powerful magnetic levers. He fell into Druso's arms like a trusting, happy child. "My friend," said Druso seriously and affectionately, "the time for the reunion has come." Terrified, Adelino began to weep, unable to leave Druso's supporting arms. "Let's pray," added our kind friend. Raising his eyes toward heaven as we listened attentively, Druso prayed. "God of goodness, Father of infinite love, you have created time as the timeless garden of our souls destined for your bosom. Strengthen us for the necessary renewal. You know our crimes and desertions. Grant us the blessing of pain and time to redeem them, and anoint us with the understanding of your laws, so that we do not waste any opportunity to pay our debts. You have lent us the treasures of work and suffering as favors of your mercy, so that we may dedicate ourselves to our dolorous but just regeneration. We are prisoners of guilt, but we are working for our freedom, helped by the breath of your love. O Father, infuse us with courage so that our weaknesses may be forgotten. Inflame our spirits with sacred enthusiasm for the good, so that evil does not destroy our good intentions, and lead us along the pathway of self-denial so that our minds do not stray from you. May we pray like Jesus, the divine master whom you sent to our hearts in order for us to accept your designs entirely. After a short pause and tears, he said the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Do not let us fall into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. So be it. When he finished, we were all overcome with deep emotion. When he was back in his physical body, Adelino woke up with tear-filled eyes. We could see his inner joy, even though he was unable to fully recall our meeting. After a few quick minutes of expectation, we heard the convulsive crying of a baby outside. Supported by Druso, Adelino got out of bed and promptly opened the front door. There on the doorstep was a newborn baby crying helplessly, watched over by friends from Mansao. Taken aback, Adelino fell down on his knees while Druso spoke to him assertively. Adelino, this is the father you harmed. He has just been rejected by the maternal love he does not yet deserve, and he has come to you, his regenerated son. Adelino did not hear Druso with his physical ears, but he did hear him in his mental temple as a loving appeal from heaven, bringing him on a more abandoned, unfortunate child. Taken with inexplicable joy, he embraced the baby in a spontaneous gesture of love, and holding him to his chest, he went back inside, shouting jubilantly, my son, my son. Highly moved, Silas informed Hilario and me. Martin Gasper has returned to the physical experience, seeking refuge in the arms of the son who disdained him. We didn't get the opportunity to prolong the conversation, however. Druso dried his tears and said aloud, as if talking to himself, when we are once again in the misty rim of the flesh, let us hope that we too may open our hearts to Jesus' sublime love, so that we may not fail at our necessary trials. There was so much depth and so much sorrow in that look, which had always inspired in us the sweetest tenderness and deepest respect, that on the way back to Mansao, none of us dared break his pain-filled, expressive silence.
Okay, that's the end of the story. So what happened to the father, Martin Gaspar, right? So the first thing that they are surprised that the next day they go back to the physical realm, to Earth, but this time with Druso, the director of the institution, the higher authority of the institution. And of course, Andre Luiz and Hilario are curious, right? Because the first time they were traveling with the mentor of the institution. They were wondering why they were leaving the institution, what would require his presence outside the institution if he had so much work to do there, right? So it was Druso, Silas, two highly experienced sisters from Mansão, Hilario, and André Luiz. And he describes that they utilized the fastest means for the trip. We are used to see them coming and going all the time. Of course, in the book The Messengers, we 2/3 of the book is the transition from Nosolar to Earth as inexperienced spiritual workers. They have to go through all the struggles to reach the physical realm. And then after that, we learn that they move at this practically at the speed of thought, right? They think of a place and they travel to the place through volitation. But here he talks about even faster way, right? They are there. He said the Druso would not have time for a trip that was not as quick as possible. So he doesn't understand exactly how they are traveling. Even him, after all this time, understanding how the spiritual world works and how to move themselves in the spiritual world, they move in a different speed that makes him wonder. But so When they arrive at Adelino's house, Andre Luiz is surprised that they are back at Adelino's house, and they are informed by two workers that the little one will be here in half an hour. It was at 2:20 a.m., and then Druso prays a very beautiful prayer. He tells Adelino falls asleep, and when he wakes up in the spiritual world, he fell in Druso's arms, of course, after spending so many years at Mansão before reincarnating. He recognizes the director, and he has a deep affection for the director. Druso says, the time for the reunion has come, and we saw the reunion, right? And then he says a very beautiful prayer, talking about our necessity to redeem ourselves, and finishes with the Lord's Prayer. And then when he finished, everyone very emotional. Adelino wakes up in the physical body with tear-filled eyes, couldn't remember exactly what the meeting was about, but after a few minutes, they hear a convulsive crying of a baby outside. And then when Adelino goes to the door, there is a newborn baby crying helplessly, watched over by those two friends from Mansão. And Druso tells mentally to Adelino when he falls on his knees, this is the father you harmed. He had just been rejected by the maternal love he does not yet deserve. Remember, the father was not a nice person also before he was killed by the son. He abused slaves, he sold slaves. So he had also a lot to pay himself. But he has come to you, his regenerated son. Adelino didn't hear Druso with the physical ears, but heard him in his mental temple. And he sees the boy and grabs the boy and says, my son, my son. And Silas then tells Hilario and Andre Luiz, Martin Gaspar has returned to the physical experience, seeking refuge in the arms of the son who disdained him. And again, it's impressive how Adelino, in one incarnation, is repairing the debts he has with his father, with his father's former wife, he receives as a daughter. They are going to be brother and sister, adopted son, but a brother and sister. The two boys that he adopted, also the two workers that helped him kill his father. So, of course, we're not going to see any of the continuation of the story, but you can only imagine the relationship between the four children. It's not going to be easy because the father has all this willingness to help, the love, but they have to endure a difficult incarnation, the four children, to repair the errors that they made themselves, and the relationships between the new reborn father and the two that helped him, killed him, and the former wife that also helped kill him, are not going to make an easy life for any of them. But because of the way Adelino is, and by the way that he behaves, he's going to give them the best possible education to allow them to make the necessary reparations for their own faults. Is it guaranteed? Of course not. They have their free will. We just study free will in the Spirit's book, and they may end up deviating from the right path and may end up accumulating more debts for their own reparation. But Adelino, we can be sure that he's going to repair everything that he has done, all the harm that he has done to himself and to others. in this incarnation. And when he returns to the spiritual world, he for sure will be there trying to help and assist these 4 children that he received as incarnated sons and daughters that are going to continually need his help and assistance besides the physical world, also back in the spiritual world. So I think the learning here in this chapter is how improbable but possible is for us to make all the reparations in one incarnation if we dedicate ourselves, if we make the effort. Again, this is the exception, this is not the rule, but it is possible. Paul of Tarsus, in his own living incarnation, was able to change and make reparations for all the mistakes he made when he was persecuting the followers of Jesus as Saul of Tarsus. And he became Paul of Tarsus and spent 40 years after this transformation actively working to repair and to disseminate the teachings of Jesus. And that's why we have Christianity the way we have today, mainly because of him. So it is possible, it is achievable, but it is very hard. And as today we commemorate Easter, which is officially the resurrection of Christ, but as we know in Spiritism, is the apparition of Christ to his disciples and his followers 2 days after he was crucified. He is the greatest proof that we have of the continuation of life after the physical death. And the apparition of Christ to his disciples and to Mary of Magdalene was the final proof that all the teachings he had left to them was true. And from then on, they followed the teachings and disseminated Christianity without interruption until they all died, all of them with the except of John, the evangelist, by being killed in the name of Jesus. John the evangelist died of old age, as did Jesus' mother, Mary, that John took care until her return to the spiritual world. Okay, so I know it's a lot of story in this chapter, but I think it was a good opportunity for us to learn what is possible to do when we dedicate ourselves to help and assist others incessantly and without hesitation. Okay, any final comments or questions?
I have some questions. Wow.
Sure, Paco.
I understand Ilario. Okay, but what about, there must be somebody in the spirit world orchestrating all these reincarnations?
Yes.
Because am I supposed to believe also that the partners in crime had some degree of repentance when they came back into his life, or not really, not necessarily?
Whom?
Or
The father?
You know, am I to believe that or not?
Yes. That
they're building, like, as a cohort, as a group. They're working in their repentance to build a better life. Am I? And somebody in the spirit world is actually coordinating that.
Yes, absolutely. In this case, Drusos, the director, is coordinating personally, right? That's why he came to the reincarnation of the father. Now, the father spent some time in Mansão also, so he prepared himself for the reincarnation. The girl and the 2 boys also are aware of the responsibilities and are receiving this opportunity, advised and directed by spiritual benefactors. But again, we have free will, right? Adelino was born and could have deviated from his responsibilities and compromised himself even further with all the sickness and everything that he may have. So yes, everything is coordinated by the spiritual benefactors, but in special cases like this, with special attention and focus by the spiritual guides, because it is something out of the ordinary. The ordinary reincarnations go in the natural process with the directions, as we discussed actually last Thursday, with the direction of the spiritual benefactors, but it's like a conveyor belt, right? The process of reincarnations. The specific cases that are out of the ordinary, like this one, everyone is assisted by the spiritual benefactors with care and with all the possible orientations for them to do the work that they are supposed to do. So they receive all the assistance. But again, we have our free will. We come here and we make our own decisions if we're going to follow or not.
Also, at the beginning of the story, Elijah gave himself too much. He was just giving himself to the world. And that's also his disciplining his own energy. So apparently he was constantly being assisted in order to do that.
Adelino?
Yeah, at the beginning, you remember that the book says, I don't have it with me now, that he was totally selfless.
Yes, exactly.
Totally selfless, and even himself, he was going through difficult times even himself because of the giving, because of the giving of himself too much. You know that when you get to the point is how much of yourself you give out and how much you keep to yourself, because if you give to yourself so excessively too much, you're going to be depleted.
Yes, so that's where the spiritual benefactors act, right? Replenishing his spiritual energies, allowing him to continue having the strength, taking care of his, minimizing the effects of the disease, and give him strength to continue, and providing external assistance by incarnate individuals that will help him, maybe provide food for his family, provide a financial assistance. This is all because he's dedicating selflessly all the time to others. He's 100% of the time receiving help and assistance from the spiritual benefactors and everything that he needs.
So he was being supported throughout.
Yes, he was all the time.
Because otherwise he would have depleted himself of all.
Yes, and remember, because he was so important to so many people, it is important for him to be able to perform his duties that he is doing. So he will receive the help and assistance of the spiritual benefactors to continue performing what he's doing.
Because the help is being multiplied. Yeah.
Multiplied, yes, exactly.
It's being multiplied. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Paco. Yes, it's very interesting, right? But again, it's the exception, it's not the rule. But it's possible. That the important thing of this chapter is it is possible. We can do it. Okay.
Now, one final question.
Sure.
Okay, and I know the answer for me. Okay, that's for sure. But in general, is it possible to go through life without the assistance of protecting spirits? In my case, it's no. Okay, but I want to hear from you. I don't think so, but I want to hear from you.
No, we have our guardian angel, who is always with us and is always trying to help and assist. Now, is it possible that we refuse to listen to the spiritual benefactors all the time? Possible, but not likely, because even though those that are focused on causing harm and are evil, they have their moments of tenderness. They have their loved ones, even if they don't. Even if it's a selfish love, they love their children or their parents or their friends or their companions, and by these small windows of opportunity, they are going to receive some sort of of advice from the spiritual benefactors, some sort of influence. It's minimal, but it's there.
It's always there. Okay. So, okay, I'm not, I believe, in my personal life, I do believe that it's, for me, in my case, it's impossible to live life without the assistance of the,
Yeah, no, for us that are trying to live a better life or
yeah.
trying to improve ourselves, we are constantly assisted by the spiritual benefactors. It's just that we are still in a phase that we sometimes hear, we sometimes don't listen to them because of our own imperfections.
Well, I usually say, I do not understand how people can live without a spiritual, assistance, without a spirit, with some kind of spirituality in their lives. It's really, it's it's beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another story. Thank you.
Thanks, Paco. So next Sunday, we are going to go back to the study of the Gospel according to Spiritism. Elmo gave the introduction to the book, and on the first time he presented the book as a whole on a talk, and then on the second study he talked about all the introduction, and now next week we are going to start on chapter 1 to study the Gospel according to Spiritism. Okay. Carol, can you do our final prayer, please?
Certainly. Thank you so much, John. And thank you, Sarita, for reading for us today. And everyone who is here, thank you. Thank you for being here and participating. Infinite Creator and Divine Providence, we give thanks to be together again for our studies of the book Action and Reaction, being Chapter 16, Mitigated Debt. Cause and consequence are always operating as universal law. High-order spirits, radiant helpers, and benefactors can bring assistance to those who maintain openness, elevated thoughts, and positive vibrations. Healings and needed resources can be provided on the physical, spiritual, and material levels through fraternal assistance and grace. Guilt and a burdened conscience go with us, and the harsh torment follows us into the spiritual world for perhaps an extended time. Repair begins through remorse, but can be changed through prayer, faith, and actions working for the good of everyone. The new resolve and behavior is seen by the obsessors and former companions in the physical world. These benefits may take many incarnations, but with deep resolve and work, this may occur in one incarnation, which is very rare. Love and resolve are powerful reminders for reparations. We give thanks to our spiritual benefactors and the good spirits for guiding and inspiring us today. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us, and for our loved ones, our teachers, our directors, our counselors, our mediums, our workers, and all of our participants. We pray for inner peace, and especially now for world peace and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for our center, SGNY, and all spiritual centers throughout the world, that they may grow, prosper, expand, and be protected throughout the day and throughout the night. As we close, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to our family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers. May we remind ourselves as we close that we can go forth now as beacons of love, of light, of peace, of service, and charity, which is love in action. May peace and love prevail, and may we be blessed this Easter. So be it.